Hey everyone, how you doing today? Really excited to talk to Greg Dickerson about topic number 2. You saw him tease it in session 1, and that is how he's structuring deals because he attacks his business very differently than I do. You have heard him say many times he likes to have none of his own money in deals, and I take great care to make sure my money's at risk first. So I want to be like you. I want to sit back and listen and see what I'm doing wrong. So how you doing this morning, buddy?
Good. How are you doing, Michael?
I'm doing well, man. I'm always excited by what you do. You're far more experienced, far more creative, doing bigger and bigger things. So I just want to talk about, your aim for doing deals is not have none or very little of your own capital in it. So I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah. So, and it's been an evolution over the career, but basically, at the end of the day, the people that got hurt in 2009 when everything went south, that had bank loans on properties, were people that had equity at risk, cash at risk. They're cash in the deals, and they guaranteed the debt.
Mm.
So those were the people that got killed. And what saved me in 08, 09, because I lost equity in all my properties just like everybody else did. And I had, I don't know, 30, $40 million worth of construction loans out at the time when all that happened.
Ouch.
And when the bank started collapsing, so all of everything was done on loan to value, like we said in the last episode. So I had a ton of equity. It got wiped out like instantly overnight. So all of a sudden these loans were upside down and the bank started calling the loans. So what saved me was I had no cash at risk and I did not guarantee any of the debt. So the banks had to work with me because they had no leverage. Now that doesn't mean they didn't come knocking and they didn't ask for everything, including my cat, my dog, and everything else I had. But I just politely said no, thank you.
Mhm.
And I said, you're welcome to take the properties. Some of them were half done, some of them were done. So, some of them were cash flowing and they were like, no, why don't you go ahead and finish them? And, we'll see what happens. So I knew, and had learned through that process, what the banks were doing, what they were willing to do, what they wouldn't do. What I didn't know was what was coming with like Lehman Brothers and stuff like that, because they were one of my lenders that I had permanent mortgage commitments on some projects that I was building, that I had construction financing on, and they were going to take out the construction loans, put them in a permanent, interest only LIBOR, which is what we were doing on all our projects. And then when I finished them and I went to get the permanent financing, well, they weren't there. And I was like, well, what the heck is going on? So that was interesting. So number one, the easiest way to get hurt is put your money at risk and guarantee the debt. All right. Even if you have non-recourse debt, a lot of people think non-recourse means there's nothing, they're not going to come after you. They're just going to take the property. There's always fine print in loan documents. And, the other thing to remember is when you're using a bank, okay, the bank is not your friend. They're great when times are good, but when times go south, man, banks protect their shareholders, their investors, their capital, and they're going to throw you by the wayside. I don't care how good of a relationship you have with your banker. They all, when they're on the, when stuff goes down, they are not your friend. They have to protect the bank, and they have rules, regulations, and laws that they'd have to adhere to. So there's only so much they can do. So every loan, once it's closed, they can call you in technical default. We've talked about this before, pretty much any time. They can call that loan due for any reason, pretty much any time, and they can find a way to make that happen based on something that is supposed to be one way or the other, based on the information you provided when you got the loan that's probably different, at this point. Non-recourse is only non-recourse to the point that all of your information and documentation is exactly the same as it was when the loan closed. There's no impropriety. There's no, whatever. And when I say impropriety, what that means is in the loan docs, it probably says all of the income you make, you have to pay the loan first, this, that, and the other. And they can go in and analyze your financials. And if you took any money and didn't pay the mortgage first and did something else first, even though you paid the mortgage, but you didn't pay it first before you distributed any of the cash, we're in default. So there's loan covenants that specify the way things have to happen and what's what. So if they go in and they start analyzing, and this is, let's say stuff goes down and things go wrong, the economy's going bad, and the bank, wants to clear the books, they're going to clear the books. They're going to find a way to get rid of that property. And if they find anything that's wrong in those records, they can come after you for the difference. Now, on the bigger properties, chances are they're not going to. They're just going to write it off. And then there's a whole taxable issue you got to deal with there if that happens. But, at the end of the day, what you got to remember is if you don't have any cash at risk and you don't have any guarantees on the debt, you're in a great position.
As you were going through this, first off, thank you for doing that. It's eye-opening to me. One of the things that I remembered very different from '06 to now is we haven't seen any bank collapses, right? That was something that was happening all the time because when banks got in trouble, right, the Fed showed up. that's when they started auditing commercial paper and going, hey, who can we, who can we put in default and kind of clean up. I haven't heard of any banks getting in trouble this crisis. Am I missing? I mean, have you heard of any?
Oh yeah. Yeah,
Oh,
banks close all the time. We just haven't seen any huge ones.
right.
But yeah, banks close all the time. And you got to understand what a bank is. They're like a syndicator.
Mm.
Banks take money and they loan it.
Yep.
So banks will make bad loans and bad things happen. But yeah, banks fail all the time. Generally, right now when times are good, it's kind of getting swept under the rug.
Right.
They're getting stress tested all the time by regulators. Their deposit requirements, are increased. So what you really want to watch is what are the federal regulators doing? What are the central banks requiring of these local banks? Are they increasing their deposit requirements? Are they increasing their leverage? Which we're almost back to where we were pre 2009 in terms of what banks are allowed to lever up to.
Mm-hmm.
But they've had to increase their deposit amounts, minimums, in order to get there. So it's interesting times. But yeah, banks collapse. I'm going to say every day a bank fails probably.
Yeah, so it's certainly not hitting the news wire like it did in 06. I mean, there was literally trackers out there about mom and pop banks going out and under. I actually wonder now, just looking into the future with these forbearance and eviction moratoriums and all these people suffering, if that's going to be kind of the story of late 2021, because there is bad debt, right? I mean, just think about the hospitality space, all these hotels, right? There's already some hotels, going out, and there's probably half completed offices and probably half completed condo towers, too much product coming out when you don't need it. It's going to be interesting to see where all that bad debt lands, because it's going to land somewhere.
Yeah, the commercial world, especially like all the reports about New York right now, 25% off in the office market there, with vacancies, with rent rates dropping. The housing market is starting to pick back up again a little bit because now everything's on sale. But the commercial office market in New York is going to take a big beating. There's REITs that are going bankrupt that are exposed, to retail and office nationwide. So yeah, there's a lot of trouble there. The big one that a lot of people are talking about and are really worried about is corporate debt.
Mm.
So there's a lot of corporate debt on the street that is not going to get paid back. It's going to get wiped out. So how exposed are the banks to that? And that's banks at the institutional level. The more investment banks that are exposed to that kind of thing. At a small level, local banks that have loaned money to small business are exposed to a degree. But the bigger what could happen on a systemic bank collapse crisis, is what I'm talking about.
Mm.
Now, the other thing that's really interesting to watch, and I talked about it in a video the other day, and we can talk about it more in depth in the next episode if we discuss Elon Musk and Bitcoin and corporate companies putting cash into Bitcoin instead of leaving it in the bank. Well, what took out a lot of banks in 08, 09 is banks started buying stocks. So the banks started saying, hey, our cash is devaluing just by keeping it on account here. This was 2009 timeframe. Let's go buy, Bank of America stock. And then that collapsed and took out a lot of banks. So corporate debt, commercial real estate, if companies and banks start buying Bitcoin or putting money into Bitcoin, it's not big enough yet. But that could if it got big enough, it could get to a point to where that could trigger a seismic event similar to 2008 and 9 and take banks out.
Oh yeah, we're definitely going to bring that up in our next conversation. Back to the one about not getting your money in deals today. I understand how you structured them before, right? Loan to value, all of that, your construction company. Some of that lending seems to have changed. I mean, are you still structuring deals today where you have very little, if any, capital in, or you just get your money back first, or what do they kind of look like today?
Yeah. So if I'm doing a deal myself, then the bank's going to want cash in that deal. So you have to put equity in up front.
Mm-hmm.
And then the only way to get that back out is to refi it later when it's done, pull that back out. But what I do more than, like now with deals that I do with other people, I don't put any of my own cash in when I'm doing, either a joint venture or if I'm syndicating a deal. So that's mainly what I'm talking about now is if I allow people to participate with me in deals, because I get people all the time, every day, hey man, what do you got going on? I want to do a deal. I want to put money to work. There's no reason for me to put my capital in. So if you have a bunch of money that you need to invest, and I've got the expertise and the vehicle for you to invest in, I don't need to put my own money in. So if I'm doing a deal with somebody, I don't put any money in that deal. So I'm either, it's my intellectual capital, it's the access to the deal, it's me managing the deal, those types of things. So I do more of that now kind of like the Trump model, right?
Mm.
Post 2009, when he or whatever it was, 04, 05, 09, whenever he got wiped out the last time, he said, look, I'm licensing my name and I'm using my intellectual capital, not my money.
Mm.
So, that was kind of his business model. It may have changed in recent years, but post 2009, I kind of switched that business model. I'm like, okay, I'm not putting my cash into anything because I saw what happened.
Mm.
And but I do have select few deals here and there where I've used my own
Yeah.
money, especially if I'm paying cash for something, that kind of thing. But then it'll get out later, and I won't put that at risk with debt either.
Right.
So I'm very careful. But really, what I mean is, if I'm going to syndicate, if I'm going to do a JV, if I'm going to have investors, there's no reason for me to put money in
Okay.
because that's what I'm doing for them. I'm serving them by giving them the opportunity to put their money to work, and I do everything else.
Very cool. So let's talk about one of those deals that you like for yourself. You're just doing solo. I'm just curious, what would your timeline be to get that capital back? Is it 12 months, 18, 6, 2? I mean, what's a general?
Yeah, I mean, post 2009, I didn't like to have anything at risk longer than 12 months.
Okay.
Now, I'm going to want to see 3, 4, maybe 6 months because I think there's a lot of potential for an event to happen for a market accident, for a liquidity crisis.
Interesting.
I think we are at a potential to see something big happen that could change things very quickly to where the last thing you want to do is tie cash up. So I think this is a good time to stack cash
Oh, there we go. All right.
and protect it.
Stack of cash. Very cool. This has been a great conversation. I appreciate you. Thank you very much.